Hello everybody, this is a quick tutorial on the instructions for doing the Making and Naming Chemical Compounds and Molecules Lab. Um, please make sure that you've looked over the notes. There's a lot of information in that that's directly related to being able to successfully do this lab. And like always, I'm going to remind you to make sure that you read the background. Um, Many of the background questions are going to be answered there and some of the overall directions. So I highlighted the areas in that background that are going to be important. So please make sure that you've read that and that you understand that. There is a secondary handout that goes with this. It looks like this. I would suggest printing one out and cutting them out. If you were doing this in class, you would have actually had 3 copies of this so that they're all cut out because those manipulatives help explain what's going on. And what they're referencing is the charges that are found up here in the cards are the same charges that you have as those red numbers at the top of each column in your periodic table. So you can do it with the manipulatives or you can do it without. Just make sure you're referencing those numbers up there. So here's what you're being asked to do in this lab. These are the ions that you're going to mix, and you're going to put them together in an appropriate combination so that you get to a rectangle. And the rectangle shape represents that you have reached a combination that gives you a neutral charge. So you have the same number of positive charges as you do negative charges. So if we take a look at that first one, I would start with a whole bunch of sodiums and a whole bunch of chlorines and start with one of each. So my cation and my anion. So right now, because that makes a rectangle, that tells me that that's a neutral charge. So the way I would write this is I have one sodium, so Na, and then I have one chlorine. So my chemical formula is NaCl. And notice that I did not write down the charges in that chemical formula. In order to name this compound, and there are directions and steps for how to do this in the background and in your notes, the first thing we want to do is we want to write the cation name. So in this case, that's sodium. And then we have a modified second ion or anion. And in this case, it's going to be chlorine is going to become chloride. All right, so what happens if you don't get a 1-to-1 ratio? So let's say, for example, I started with calcium, which has a +2 charge, and you can see that from your periodic table, and that I wanted to use chlorines. Well, if I add one chlorine, that gets me an incomplete rectangle. So obviously that's not going to get me to neutral. I have 2 plus and 1 minus. So I have to add a second chlorine in there. There's my rectangle. So I have +2 and -2. So if this was what I had here, I would write down my calcium and then my chlorine. And since I have 2 of them, I'm going to use a little subscript right there to indicate that there are 2 of them. And then if I were to write down the name of this, it would be calcium. And again, the modified ending for chloride. All right, there is a catch down here. When you look down at the very bottom, you'll see that you have some Roman numerals. Please make sure that you look back through the background and the notes for what those Roman numerals mean, and they become important not only in getting to neutral, but also in naming the compound. In part B, you're working with covalent compounds, and it gives you a reference up here on a page in your book to help with the prefixes. But in general, what we're going to do is we are going to use these prefixes to tell us how many of each atom type there are. So di means 2, tetra means 4. So if I'm going to write the chemical compound, that's going to be nitrogen with 2, oxide, and that's the modified ending for oxygen. So it's going to be oxygen, and there's 4. So that's how I would answer that one. All right, good luck. Email us if you have questions, and make sure this is all wrapped up by Friday, and have a great week.